According to the U.S. Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Statistics, the number of new death sentences peaked in the mid to late 1990s, with an average of over 300 new sentences per year. More recently, as of 2009, that number has fallen to 106, two-thirds of its former value. Today I'm standing before you to tell you the truth behind the statistics of capital punishment and explain the controversy behind it. Capital punishment gives courts the power to sentence a convicted criminal to death, depending on the severity of the crime committed by said criminal. Typically, the crime committed involves murder. Why should someone who's taken another's life deserve to keep their own? Capital punishment reduces the number of violent crimes committed. If states would allow capital punishment, then violent crime rates would go down across the country. Today I will be exploring the controversy behind capital punishment, as well as the effect it would have on violent crime. Many people stand in opposition to capital punishment. However, capital punishment would be a major deterrent to potential criminals. We will be reviewing if capital punishment is more useful and helpful than detrimental, whether the death penalty is publicly supported or not, the cost of the death penalty, if capital defendants have adequate legal representation in court, and whether capital punishment is constitutional or not. To begin, capital punishment is more useful than detrimental. Statistics show that capital punishment is a deterrent to potential criminals, leading to less violent crime. According to a study by Hashem Dezbakesh, Paul Rubin, and Joanna Shepard, each death penalty execution prevents an average of 18 murders based on data from before and after then recent death penalty moratoriums. So, in other words, they support the statement that capital punishment is a deterrent to potential criminals. Another study, performed by Isaac Elric, showed that each execution prevents an average of 8 murders, based on data from the period of time from 1933 to 1969. So, whether it is 8 or 18, the death penalty still helps to prevent murders and other violent crimes. Next, I will discuss whether the death penalty is supported by the general public or not. According to a poll conducted by the Pew Research Center, 49% of Americans support capital punishment. 42% do not support capital punishment. Even today, more citizens support the death penalty than don't. The majority of Americans continue to support the death penalty, likely because they realize it's a good way to deal with violent criminals. This graph shows the trend of Americans supporting the death penalty. Right here in 1936, the blue bar is for Americans for the death penalty, and the orange is for those against. It goes from 1936 to 2009. The only point in time where the majority of Americans did not support it was a period in around 1966, where more people were against it. But overall, for people convicted of murder, Americans are a majority in favor of the death penalty. Next, I will discuss the costs of the death penalty. The death penalty does not cost as much as many people think. Most people believe that life imprisonment is less expensive than capital punishment. However, this is not always the case. Justice for All, otherwise known as JFA, found that life imprisonment could cost $1.2 to $3.6 million more per case than the death penalty. It is true that the immediate costs of life without parole are significantly lower than capital punishment. However, over time, life imprisonment without parole ends up costing much more than the death penalty, as the convicts are imprisoned longer, need more food, supplies, etc., and generally cost more money. Simply put, the death penalty is cheaper than life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Now, having talked about issues that come about after the death penalty is handed out, are there any issues related to actually handing out the death penalty? Of course. One such issue is if capital defendants have adequate legal representation in court. Opponents to the death penalty will point to cases where the defense attorney is sleeping on the job, leading to mistaken convictions, and other such scenarios where the defense attorney is not adequately doing his job. However, this is rarely the case. According to the California District Attorneys Association, defense lawyers do not change how they do their job when on a capital case. They know that everything they do will be under scrutiny, and because of this, they make sure they make no errors, providing another layer of protection to the defendants. They do this because it is imperative to their job that they do the best that they can to defend the defendants. States often provide their best and brightest attorneys to death row cases. That is because they are very heavily controversial cases, so they make sure that nothing screws up. Of course, you can find individual cases of misrepresentation in capital cases, but as a whole, defense attorneys in capital cases do an incredible job. Finally, I will discuss the most debated issue having to do with the death penalty, whether it's constitutional or not. The Constitution states, in several instances, that capital punishment is legal and allowed, not just not without due process of law. Many opponents to capital punishment would say that it is unconstitutional because it's taking another person's life. However, this argument is invalid, as the Constitution plainly states. The Fifth Amendment reads, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." This means that a person's life may be taken after they are tried and convicted and sentenced to death. This is only one instance where the Constitution supports capital punishment. Another instance of support from the Constitution is the Eighth Amendment, perhaps the most famous instance. It's the amendment that outlaws cruel and unusual punishment. Death is not considered cruel and unusual, as it is commonplace. Everyone dies eventually. Also, the government has worked to make sure that the methods of execution are not cruel. For example, lethal injection. Lethal injection is quick and does not cause a lot of pain. The prisoner would first receive a shot of 3 grams of sodium thiopental, an anesthetic. That is 10 times more anesthesia than people are given before surgery. Kyle Janik, a Texas senator and anesthesiologist, says, "I can attest with all medical certainty that anyone given this massive dose would certainly be under anesthesia." The prisoner would then be given a shot to relax the muscles. This is important as this will make them not feel as much pain. They are then given a shot that will stop the heart. The prisoner will not feel pain during this process due to the sodium thiopental. To review, we will be reviewing if capital punishment is more useful and helpful than detrimental, whether the death penalty is publicly supported or not, the cost of the death penalty, if capital defendants have adequate legal representation in court, and whether capital punishment is unconstitutional or not. Capital punishment helps prevent violent crime, is generally supported by the public, and costs less over time than life in prison without parole. Capital defendants have more than adequate legal representation in court, and lastly, capital punishment is in the Constitution several times and therefore is entirely constitutional. If you are against capital punishment, realize that it is an effective way of dealing with violent crime and can be made more efficient with research and time. Capital punishment is not likely to disappear anytime soon. If you are still opposed to it and disagree with what I have told you, do some research. I'm sure you can come up with the same information.